The FBI is alleging that there was absolutely no hate crime committed against the black NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace, who was informed earlier this week that there was a noose hanging from his garage. Now, the FBI claims that the discovery of the rope was actually just a garage pull rather than a noose. But I gotta be honest, there are images of it now, and if you look at it, it looks like a noose. So I can understand why there was some confusion here. Now, NBC News is reporting that a noose was found hanging in black stock car racer Bubba Wallace's garage stall in Alabama, but it was a pole that had been placed there in October, long before the stall was assigned to Wallace. Review of security video following the discovery of the noose at Talladega Super Speedway showed that the noose had been put up nearly 8 months ago, and that's according to a joint statement from the US Attorney's Office and the FBI. Wallace was assigned the garage space last week, which, quote, nobody could have known in 2019, the statement said. So that's the update. Unfortunately, there are some pretty dishonest people using this to attack Bubba Wallace, although Bubba Wallace wasn't the person who discovered the noose. He wasn't the person who reported the noose. In fact, he's gonna explain that in more detail in the upcoming clip. So let's take a look at the first one.
The FBI saying you were not the target of a hate crime and that it had been there at least since last October. When you found that out on Tuesday, Bubba, what was your initial reaction?
I was relieved, just like many others, to know that it wasn't targeted towards me. But it's still frustrating to know that people are always going to test you and always just going to try to debunk you, and that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around now. From saying I'm a fake and all this stuff, and that I reported it when it was news that was brought to me. It was information that was brought to me that was already reported, and so I was just kind of following suit.
So unfortunately, Bubba Wallace is being targeted by right wingers who are upset that NASCAR has banned the Confederate flag at NASCAR events. Bubba Wallace was outspoken about that. And so I think that some dishonest people are using this update to the news story to basically attack him and attack his character. But again, he's not the one who discovered it and he's not the one who reported it. The person who first reported it to Wallace was NASCAR President Steve Phelps. Phelps said in a virtual teleconference that rope went unnoticed as there had not been a race at the speedway since October. He also wanted to be clear that the news had nothing to do with Wallace. And here is a quote: "I want to be clear about the 43 team. The 43 team had nothing to do with this. The evidence is very clear that the noose that was in the garage had been in the garage previously." So that's the update coming from the NASCAR president. But I do want to hear a little more from Wallace. Let's take a look at the next clip, and then I want your thoughts, John.
When I did find out, I was very adamant on searching all the garages and making sure that this wasn't a garage pool, and ended up being one. But the photo evidence that I've seen and that I have in my possession of what was in our garage is exactly a garage pool. It is. That is a noose. So it's it's, I don't know when we'll get to the point to release that image, but it's anybody sees it, then it's alerting, and it makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up for sure. But all in all, like NASCAR says, it's a thing that I wouldn't change a thing. I would alert the NASCAR officials and let them kind of take care of it. If I had seen it in person, let them know about it and let them take care of it.
So John, look, given today's climate, it's not shocking to find a noose, which is why so many people probably believed it to be a noose. Like whoever discovered it, the NASCAR president reporting it, there's the photo. So I mean, I can totally understand why someone would see that and think that, hey, that looks like a noose, because it looks like a noose. So I wanted to get your thoughts, and then we have one more clip to get to.
Okay, so two sets of thoughts. The first is, like we are at such a disadvantage. And this story, I think, perfectly demonstrates it. That when you see this story, you want to know what actually happened. Was there hate crime? Was a noose left? Was it targeted at this individual? Answers to facts so that we can then understand what's going on. But the right wing isn't interested in that. They just want to use it to attack people, to pretend that hysteria is going on when it's not all of that. And he's now being affected by that. So even if the initial hate crime wasn't there, he is now receiving hate just because he was dragged into this thing. Isn't it convenient how that works out? And when the cops report that people put bleach in this and threw that, and there's a tampon in your coffee or whatever, and then it turns out that none of that's true. The right has already used it and moved on. They don't care about whether the things actually happened. They got their use out of it. They squeezed all the juice they could out of it, and then they've moved on. All of these stories, the actual truth is irrelevant to our opposition, and that is very frustrating. But I just want to briefly say that with this story, and I admit partially because it's a sports story, I didn't actually learn about this story in the way that I normally do with the news. Normally, we have a very sort of efficient, machine-like approach to digesting news where we go through multiple sources and all of that. With this, I didn't initially. I sort of followed it like I imagine a lot of people who are really distracted and don't have a ton of time where they're contractually obligated to follow the news did. And my experience was complete bewilderment as to what the actual facts were. Because every update seemingly fundamentally shifted what the story of the story was. And it's so hard to actually understand what was really going on. And I'm sure that's actually true of a lot of stories if you aren't being paid to follow this. Like some of these stories are incredibly complicated to follow along. And so I found that to be frustrating. And I imagine the experience of people just wanting to know what's really going on, that this must have been a very frustrating past couple of days.
Yeah, especially for Wallace, above anyone else. And he shares a little bit of that in an interview with Don Lemon. Let's watch.
Is that typical?
Don, the image that I have and I have seen of what was hanging in my garage is not a garage pool. I've been racing all my life. We've raced out of hundreds of garages that never had garage pools like that.
So look, I don't blame anyone for discovering that and thinking that it's a noose. That's what it looked like. I have to be honest, I would assume that the garage or the garages for NASCAR would be operated electronically rather than relying on a pull. But whatever. I mean, this is the update, and yeah, probably you're probably right. But nonetheless, this is not. He didn't do anything wrong. So the hatred directed toward him is absolutely disgusting and unacceptable. But let's say, you give right wingers the benefit of the doubt, which I would never do. But let's say we did that, okay? And it turned out that this is some crazy conspiracy. Bubba Wallace is behind it. It doesn't erase the fact that we live in a country that's dealing with a very serious problem with racism. It doesn't change that. So if they're gonna point to this story or compare it to what happened with Jussie Smollett, none of that erases the horrific video evidence that we've been seeing every single day for the past several weeks when it comes to Black people in this country and how they're treated by law enforcement, how they're treated by private citizens on the streets, how they're treated when they go to the stores, when they go to banks, when they go anywhere. That is a very real systemic problem we have. And so they can go ahead and deflect and point to squirrels all they want. But this NASCAR story is just one tiny story that's on this enormous pile of race-related issues that we need to deal with in the country.
100%.
That's just the truth.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.